morning. Thank you for your prompt attendance this morning. It's a pleasure to see you all in a New York state of mind as we get ready for our second program and day of diversity, launched by a conference and followed by workshops today. I have just a few words of introduction, first of all, and second of gratitude, before I pass the microphone over to a speaker to introduce today's conférencier. This marks the second time that we are observing a Day of Diversity and Understanding, and this initiative was launched at the request of students. Last year, you may recall, those of you in Première Terminale, we watched and we analyzed the French documentary Trop Noir pour être Française. We continue that pattern of working on issues of diversity, equity, understanding, and inclusivity today, again focusing on media and practicing media literacy by the analysis of three American TV programs. We're very privileged to have our guest today, but I'll let Giacomo introduce him in a moment. I advise all of you take out something to write with and something to write on. It'll be helpful for the program that will follow after this conference. While you're getting yourselves organized, I'd like to pass on to a few words of gratitude. First of all, I'm grateful to our diversity leaders in the school, our diversity club moderators, and our diversity committee, who have been at the forefront of advancing these issues and spearheading our school-wide dialogue on these very important topics. Secondly, I wanted to thank our administration for their support, financial and moral. Third, I'd like to thank Madame Pascale Richard, who's, through the Cultural Center, made this opportunity possible. And I'd like to thank all of the advisors who prepared you, and thank you for preparing in advance. This is going to be a weighty topic, and so it required advanced reflection. If I could have your attention now. Thank you. Last but not least, I have to thank Madame Marlène Sajou, who really made this logistically feasible, as you see in the workshops and breakout groups that will follow immediately after this conference. So now I'd like to pass the microphone over to a student for whom I have a lot of respect, whom I'm very proud of. I'd like to say I had the privilege of teaching him briefly this year when I substituted in Terminale OIB history. He is an advocate of diversity and an outspoken leader at this school, and therefore it's a privilege to invite him to introduce Professor Olivier Esteves to you this morning. Giacomo Finale.
Olivier Esteves is a professor of British history at Lille University in France. He also teaches at Sciences Po Lille. His research team is also based in this town. His works on ethnicity, integration, and identity in British culture since 1945 are groundbreaking, and he has also worked on British intellectuals such as George Orwell and Bertrand Russell from that time period. He's the author of Une histoire populaire du boycott, as published by Paris in Lartman Publishing House in 2006, and this book had 2 volumes. He edited with Denis Lacan and Emmanuel Le Texier, Les politiques de la diversité, expérience américaine et anglaise, as published by Sciences Po Publishing House in Paris in 2010. Olivier Esteves is also a regular contributor to the French public debate on the issues of immigration, identity, and ethnicity. And he's written documents for Libération, Huffington Post, Le Monde, and interviews on radio shows with France Inter, France Culture, and France Internationale. On the behalf of my classmates and by the power vested in me, I welcome Mr. Esteves to the Lycée Français.
Thanks a lot, Giacomo. Thanks a lot, Arthur. So, I'm very delighted and jet-lagged to be in New York because I arrived yesterday, last night from Paris. I would like to thank very warmly all the people that have made this event possible, starting with Damien Renon, the librarian, Arthur Plaza, Pascal Richard, the proviseur Sean Lynch, and plenty of teachers, colleagues that, I mean, whose names escape me, but people that I will come to meet probably today, after this talk. Okay, so thanks a lot again to all of you for making this event possible. I would like to start off this presentation of three small short scenes from American TV series by really briefly saying that it's part of a book project, a book that was published with a friend of mine, Sébastien Lefay, and published by Presse de Sciences Po 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, 2014, I think it was. Sounds like a very long time ago now. And we insist on the need for micro-analyses, which means that we pick up specific scenes, very short scenes from quality American series, and we really try to decipher these scenes as much as possible, okay? I suppose the right French verb for it would be décrypter, okay? Now, the way I will try to, my title is Making Sense of Race in American Series. I will try to understand race in a very, I like it when the noise stops. I think it's very, it's quite cool. Just before I forget, if I happen to speak too fast, you can just tell me to speak down, okay? Or if I don't get the hint, you can throw a pen at me or something. But just make sure you don't throw it too hard, okay? The way we understand race in this book is we understand it very broadly, very loosely. For instance, I will look at a scene from Homeland, which really places the focus on the question of Islam, okay? We all know that Islam is a religion and not a race, but in the way Islam is understood or misunderstood by people in France or by some people in the United States, it is broadly understood as a racial question. Think, for instance, about the way in France we refer to this adjective or noun, maghrébin, without necessarily knowing whether we refer to a religious identity, which we always associate with Islam, or to a racial or ethnic identity, people from North Africa, okay? One other thing I want to insist on before we start is that since 1945, since the Holocaust was discovered by Allied troops, there has been a broad consensus to refer to race as a totally unscientific thing, okay? We all know that black people and white people, they share the same blood, okay? And this has been a total consensus since 1945. However, race is generally seen as a social construct. In other words, it is something which is totally socially constructed, okay? It's a lot of the differences which are made between races are mythical, are invented, okay? But ultimately they may have very serious social consequences, okay? So I refer you to what is called the W.I. Thomas theorem, dating back to 1928, when W.I. Thomas, a major sociologist, said, I quote, "If man defines situations as real, however mythical they may be," that's the idea, "if man defines situations as real, they become real in their consequences." I think this is really the kind of theorem that was at the back of our minds when we started to work on the book project, La question raciale dans les séries américaines, okay? Okay. Before I start, I also want to say that I will try to keep this as clear as possible. I know that all of you are high school students, lycéens, and I haven't been teaching in high school for many, many years. I started off as a professeur de lycée, but that was millions of years ago. So I will try to be as clear as possible in the way I try to communicate some of these complex ideas to you guys out there, okay? So maybe we can start by watching the scene from The Wire, if that's possible, and then I'll say a few words about it.
There's got to be rules, or else things get fucked up.
Ain't no rules for dope fiends.
When the police got you shackled up, you make a move, right? You help yourself out. But to just start snitching for no reason, that doesn't make no sense.
Whoa. Let me track this. You are populating that you can tattletale when you're locked up, but you can't do it straight up for the money? I mean, no offense, son, but that's some weak ass thinking. You equivocating like a motherfucker.
Okay, so a snitch is a snitch, right?
There you go.
So why be one, man? I mean, we're getting by with our capers.
Yeah, we getting by out here every damn day, ripping and running, and ain't got shit to show for it.
It's part of being a soldier. I mean, that's true, right? That's what you say.
Yeah, that's why I put all these models in these feet. You wait till you ain't a pup no more. See if you ain't looking for something a little more steady for your own self. What the fuck? You ill already? It's not even past morning.
I'm cool, man. I'm fine.
Look, we hook up with my girl Kima, we get paid, you're gonna be better.
No, fuck that, Bubs, all right? I'm not a fucking snitch.
You know what? I can argue the other side. Say that if you drop down and duck a charge, then you a snitch. You do it as a living, you're a professional.
Whoa, hold up. You see that ladder right there? Just like old times, man. I'll be the bad guy, you be the Lone Ranger.
Leave that man be. We get paid more hooking up to my girl.
But that's cash money right there.
With the white man, I best be the bad guy. That way he ain't confused.
All right, meet me in the alley.
Fuck. Yo, mister!
Yo!
Turn on your wallet or I'm gonna jerk this ladder right out.
What? No,
Come
no.
on, I'm a poor man who ain't playing. Just
No,
turn on the goddamn
no.
money.
Wake up!
Come on.
Okay. Hey, leave that man alone.
Thank you. It's crazy, man. What's that guy doing? Oh, shit. Here.
I can't.
Yeah, no, you saved my ass.
Hey, it's appreciated, you know? Yo, Bubs, you won't fucking believe this. Bubs.
Okay, thank you. Okay, many thanks. Okay, so can we go back to the PowerPoint? Okay, fair enough, cool. So it is very unoriginal to be watching a scene from The Wire for a very simple reason, which is The Wire is probably the most mediated quality American series around the world. What I mean by this is that you have plenty of conferences, talks, articles. I know there used to be a seminar at Harvard University on The Wire, and none other than Barack Obama has said time and again that he was a major fan of The Wire, okay? So now, I will try and give you a few clues to try and make sense of this scene we've just been watching, all right? There's a little bit of, I don't know. It's probably going to be better this way, unless I use the mic. I don't know. Okay, so first of all, you need to understand, well, The Wire is set in Baltimore. Like many American series from HBO, for instance, there's a local setting that is fundamental, all right? Well, I can walk around. It's probably better doing that. Okay, so and then I can use this too. I have never used this in my whole life, but it looks pretty straightforward. Okay, so it's set in Baltimore, like many quality American series. There's a local setting that is fundamental. It's really based in post-industrial Baltimore, okay? What I mean by this is that a lot of the series is about the city of Baltimore after what we call in French la fin du travail. In other words, after dozens of thousands of jobs have gone, okay? With factories being closed, the docks are almost moribund, etc., etc. The scene that you watched contrasts very graphically, I think, with these two photos out here, which are classical American photos by photographer Audrey Bodine, okay? The first one is on the left is taken at Locust Point, which is next to the Baltimore docks. Okay, the second season of Baltimore is really about the Baltimore docks. And as you can see, there's a huge contrast with the scene that we just watched, in the sense that there's a real sense of neatness and cleanliness in this left-hand side photo, which contrasts with all these white plants and weeds that grow all over the place in this black ghetto of Baltimore that we watched in the scene, okay? We almost have the impression that the beginning of the scene is set like in the park, okay? Because it's very, very green, but it's all about wild plants and, you know, weeds just growing all over the place, okay? And so on the right, as you can see, there's an illustration of the sort of virile type of work that you would get on the docks in Baltimore before what started to be called deindustrialization at the end of the 1970s and early 1980s. Okay, so the Baltimore was really one of those cities in the United States that was very tragically affected by the phenomenon known as deindustrialization in the late 70s and 80s. So the scene is really illustrating what happens when so many thousands of these jobs have gone, okay? How do people try to get by, okay? For the record, this photo that you can see on the right there is used in The Wire itself in the second season to illustrate indeed the disappearance of jobs on the docks, okay? Now, this is just the next slide about this about The Wire. This is taken from this is a quote taken from season 2, okay, which illustrates the end, the disappearance of work, which is pronounced by a trade union leader of Polish origins, Frank Sobotka. As you can see there, this is an interview that Barack Obama had with David Simon, the creator of The Wire, whom he invited at the White House, okay? This is the first time I'm seeing David Simon wearing a suit and a tie, okay? And so they're discussing the issue of what David Simon calls drug-saturated Baltimore, okay? What is important in the scene and in The Wire in general is that working class folks in downtown Baltimore are affected by unemployment regardless of what racial group they belong to. In other words, both working class whites and working class blacks are massively affected by unemployment, okay? And so this is also what you can see in the scene with Johnny, who is a white junkie, having a conversation with Bubs, who is a black junkie, okay? Let me move on to what follows. In the book, we insist a great deal on the structure of the scene that we think is implacably clear-cut, okay? By which I mean that in the first part of the scene, you know, there's this debate or disagreement about the issue of snitching. The black guy is saying, yeah, why shouldn't we snitch? Because, you know, we make money with that by snitching to the police, blah, blah, blah. I can become a professional snitch, which is a concept I quite like. And then the white guy is saying, no, there's a moral code, you know, a snitch is a snitch, why be one, etc., etc. In this debate, the question of race is absolutely, totally absent. It's not there at all, okay? By the time there's a third character that arrives on stage, you know, this guy atop the ladder, okay? By this time, the question of race is at the center of debate, okay? With this proverbial statement made by Bubs, who says, with the white man, I best be the bad guy. That way he ain't confused, okay? With the white man, I best be the bad guy. That way he ain't confused. So he places the focus on race, and the rest of the scene really must be understood in the perspective of, you know, stereotypes against black people by white folks who probably don't live in that area of Baltimore, okay? So what I find also quite interesting in this scene is the way Bubs here is exploiting some racial stereotypes in order to make money, in order to just get by, okay? So there is economic profit involved, however small, okay? But it's always at the expense of, you know, racial harmony, I suppose you could call it, okay? Now let me move on to let me move on to another dimension in this scene. I'm just going to check the time. Yeah, I think we're pretty safe. as in many American series, you have a couple of friends with one black guy, one white guy, okay? You find that a lot, okay? And you have been finding this a lot for many, many decades, okay? In some cases, it is just a very superficial display of ethnic diversity that you can find in American series, right? But in The Wire, very clearly, it's got to be like that. It's got to be about black folks mixing with white folks, precisely because Baltimore is a black majority city. Okay, so it really boils down to plain demography here. As you can see, this is a list it's taken from the census 2010, so I can only imagine that many of these statistics haven't changed that much. Baltimore is number 4 among the black majority cities in the United States with 73.4% of people, no, it's not, so, sorry, that's Birmingham, Alabama. So it's 5th with 63.7% of black people in the downtown area of Baltimore, okay? So a very clear illustration of this is all the pairs that you find in The Wire, okay? So those of you that are familiar with The Wire, there's probably a smile on your faces right now because you recognize some of these very moving and funny characters that you can find in the series. With some of them are cops, okay? Like these two pairs at the top there, and then these two cops on the left. Some of them are post-industrial cowboys, like Omar. That's Omar here, who is Barack Obama's favorite character, for the record. Some of them are politicians here, and some of them are junkies. As you can see, Johnny and Bobs. Okay? Ils n'ont pas l'air très en forme là sur cette photo, mais bon, bref. Okay, so I would like to insist on other elements before we move on to the second scene. The sense of humor, right? Humor is at the heart of this scene. However serious the issues that are tackled are, humor is really at the heart of the scene. Okay? Think about from a graphic or from a visual viewpoint, the issues that the things that we are familiar with as spectators, and the things that the guy on top of the ladder is not. Okay, I think that's important. Now we know this is just make-believe, okay? But the guy on top of the ladder clearly doesn't know that. And the way the camera moves, I mean, you can watch it back home again, but the camera moves and they're very, very cleverly made, okay? Another thing I would like to insist on, obviously, is the very pedestrian metaphor of the ladder. The ladder makes you think about the social ladder, very obviously. So this is clearly a metaphor as well. One other thing that I find very interesting in this scene is that if David Simon was here, we would ask him, listen, in real life it doesn't happen like that, now does it? Why? Because this guy on top of the ladder is totally alone, right? Normally, if there is renovation of a big building like that, you would have a whole crew of people with 12 or 20 people who could normally be able to defend themselves. But it's like this guy is really in the middle of this post-industrial desert here in the black ghetto of Baltimore. One other irony before we move on is the, sorry, I don't know the English for it. I used to know that, but it's pistolet à colle or pistolet à mastic, right? You must have seen this. The guy on top of the ladder has got this pistolet à colle, right? Which is sorry? A cup. Okay, thanks. Cup gun, okay? Okay, but what I find interesting in this, obviously, is the way it looks. It could look like a real gun, but it isn't. So he's not going to defend himself with that, very obviously, okay? And you can think about the sense of defenselessness of this guy at the very top of the ladder. Okay, we can now move on to the second scene, which is from Homeland. From the first season of Homeland, escape again, or sorry, I'm not used to Apple, so sorry. Oh yeah. Ça va?
the video on the desktop, Arthur. On the desktop, already download.
Okay, so just to introduce the scene briefly, this is taken from season 1 of Homeland. Okay, there is very little talk in the scene. Okay, and the scene very cleverly, challenges some of our stereotypes about Islam in general. Okay, so for those of you that are familiar with Homeland, you can probably understand what I mean. Okay.
Hello? Please answer.
Shit, Virgil.
Allahu Akbar. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Ar-Rahmanir-Rahim. Maliki. Allahu Akbar. Subhan Rabbiyal Allah, Subhan Rabbiyal Allah, Subhan Rabbiyal Allah. Allahu Akbar.
Hey. Couldn't sleep?
I was cleaning out the garage. Oh. Yeah, I fixed the door.
ready? Is it true you're going to enlist?
Would you ever go back to Iraq?
Saul, turn on your TV. It's happening. Exactly what you said. He's out there playing the hero card.
So this is the second scene that I would like to discuss with you. Okay, whoops. I'm just going to remove this. Yeah, okay. Okay, so some of you may have seen this scene already. I want to insist on a few things that I find... Thanks. Thanks a lot, Arthur. Okay, F5 should do it. No, well, sorry, I'm sorry, I'm not... Okay, well... Yeah, I've entitled this study "Inside the Black Box of Islamophobia." Islamophobia is a very contested concept that I use, but that I try to use very cautiously, as I'll try to say. Okay, so just one or two elements of context. Yeah, sorry. Okay, thanks. Just one or two elements of context. This scene was broadcast in 2010 or 2011, I think it was. And this was at the time when Barack Obama was president. Let's not sound nostalgic about this. It's very important for you to bear in mind that at that time, so just 5 or 6 years ago, Islamophobia in the United States was stronger or even much stronger than at the time of 9/11, okay? This is a very important fact which, in a way, situates the immediate background of the broadcasting of Homeland, okay? And if you want to get some more information about this increase of Islamophobia from 2001 to 2010, 2011, I suggest you should read this book or parts from this book, or, you know, colleagues among the teachers that teach history, for instance. It's in French called L'Islam, une religion américaine, ? By Nadia Marzouki, okay? And she insists a great deal on this. And one of the reasons why there has been an increase of Islamophobia is precisely the figure of Barack Obama. There are millions of Americans out there, as many of you know, who strongly believe, who are convinced that Barack Obama is a Muslim, right? And is potentially a Muslim with a hidden agenda. I mean, after all, he's a Muslim, right? You know, this is the general stereotype about Muslims that here, Homeland is exploiting very clearly, but also exposing, you know, challenging, you know, denouncing, okay, in a very complex way, okay? So I don't have time to discuss this cover from the New Yorker, but obviously, it was released, it was published before Barack Obama was president. It's July 2008, okay? And you shouldn't misconstrue, you shouldn't misinterpret this cover. It's a caricature of a caricature. It's a caricature of the caricatural stereotypes about Barack Obama. The New Yorker is not presenting Barack Obama as a Muslim with a hidden agenda. The New Yorker is exposing some of the alternative facts, in a way, some of the myths around Barack Obama, all right? I want to insist too on the general ordinariness, ordinariness of Muslims in the United States, okay? It's part of what is great about this book by Nadia Marzouki. She insists on the way Muslims in the United States, they really are just like anybody else in the American population, okay? Olivier Roy is a big name, okay? Who prefaced this study by Nadia Marzouki, says, I quote in the French language, aux États-Unis, le débat sur l'immigration et les exclus concerne des populations qui ne sont pas ou très peu musulmanes. Les latinos pour l'immigration et les noirs américains pour l'exclusion sociale. This means that all of the issues that we have in France about integration or, you know, vivre ensemble, living together, blah, 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 in the United States, it really has no resonance with the Muslims, okay? Because most of these issues in the United States are associated either with African Americans or with Latinos. Hence the general ordinariness of Muslims in the United States, okay? As I said before, funny how this photo, you can't find anything on it. It's just, Okay, it's almost totally black. Homeland fuels our Western stereotypes about Islam and then challenges them, okay? In this scene that we watched, it's clear that, you know, this character, Nicholas Brody, has something to hide, okay? He's hiding the fact that he is a Muslim. He's hiding it to his wife because he just came back from Iraq, okay? Hasn't said yet that he's a convert, okay? And prays in his garage, okay? And it's very ironic the way the Homeland is sort of suggesting the idea that the very fact of being a Muslim and even and especially a praying Muslim, you know, a Muslim at prayer, is in itself suspicious, something which Homeland then challenges, okay? I also like the way the garage is seen as a sort of liminal space, a transitional space between public and private, which is always a major issue whenever we discuss questions of religion, for instance, whether, you know, religion should be in the public or in the private space. So here the garage is a sort of transitional space between the two, okay? And Homeland also insists on how, insists on this general concept that you have to have been brainwashed in order to become a Muslim, which is what the scene here suggests, but then very cleverly challenges, okay? As you can see, you know, there's a reference to the period when Brody was a hostage in Iraq, okay? I'm not sure I have a great deal of time to discuss this. I'm going to insist on the question of pure Islamophobia because I found this idea interesting. In sociology, generally, we talk about the importance of intersectionality, what we call in the French language intersectionalité. It's a big, big word. You don't need to remember it. But what it means is that in order to understand society, we have to understand that it's not all about race. It's not all about class. It's not all about gender, right? It's not all about age or culture or language. It's about a mix of all these different elements, a mix of all these different criteria. And this makes a great deal of sense whenever we discuss the question of Islamophobia. If we discuss the question of Islamophobia in France or in the Netherlands or in Belgium or in Germany, Islamophobia is connected with the issue of being a foreigner, okay? In other words, there's the stereotype that Islam is the religion of the foreigners. As I said before, les Maghrébins. Quand on dit en français les Maghrébins, on suggère que ces personnes-là ne sont pas françaises. Alors qu'une grande partie, effectivement, de ces Maghrébins sont des citoyens français, okay? The second thing is gender, okay? It's clear that in Britain or in France, the very large majority of anti-Muslim assaults, they target directly females, especially hijab-wearing females, okay? So gender is also important. Another thing which is important is class. In France especially, or in the Netherlands or in Belgium, generally Islam is seen as the religion of the poor, la religion du pauvre. Despite, you know, Qatar, you know, the fact that they own Paris Saint-Germain and all this, right? Okay? Let's not talk about Barcelona, Paris Saint-Germain, okay? Which was a wonderful game. Okay, so let me come back to that. What is very interesting in Homeland is that Homeland suggests the idea of pure Islamophobia. In other words, a 100% hostility against nothing but a religion. Why? Because Brody is white, he is middle class, he lives in leafy suburbia, and he is an American hero. He is a soldier coming back from Iraq, okay? And so the reason why there could be hostility against him is precisely only because he is a Muslim. And that idea I find very interesting and indeed very challenging, okay? Let me move on to what follows. I don't have much time to discuss this, but in the book we make, I think, what I hope is an interesting parallel between you know, Homeland and the fate of Nicholas Brody and the tragic fate of Timothy McVeigh. I don't know whether anybody is familiar with what happened in 1995 with this terrorist attack by Timothy McVeigh on Oklahoma City, but I suppose that some of the teaching, teachers, colleagues here could try and, you know, exploit this, or it's a very, very important fact of contemporary American history that I suppose most of you are not familiar with for one reason, which is you were not born at that time. Okay, but we make a parallel between Timothy McVeigh and Brody. One reason is the inflated sense of injustice among the two. It's only one parallel out of many, but that parallel, I think, is very important. Gore Vidal, who passed away a few years ago, referred to McVeigh as, I quote, overly sensitive to the point of being a little paranoid about the reactions of the government. It was a conscious, so the terrorist attack by Timothy McVeigh, who killed more than 150 people, was mostly because of his inflated sense of injustice, okay? And it was a conscious choice on his part, not because he was deranged, but because he was serious, okay? Let me move on to the third episode now. The third scene. Okay, I hope I'm not gonna make a mess of it yet again. So the third scene is from Oz. Sorry. What is it again? Oh, it's sur le desktop, ouais. I hope I can get away with murder because I'm not used to Apple. Sur le desktop. Je pense qu'on est bon. Le timing est compliqué avec les 3 scènes. Wow. Okay, so this is a scene from Oz, from season 1 to Oz, which was broadcast for the record on HBO in 1997. Who was born in 1997 among you? 1997. Okay, so you have no memory of France winning the World Cup, then? Okay. Fair enough. Don't worry, it was a very boring World Cup. I know I'm going to get killed for that, but it's true. Okay. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Oz, with the American series called Oz, but it was a major trailblazer in terms of very good quality series like The Sopranos, The Wire, etc., etc. And it massively inspired a series like Prison Break. Okay, so you might be familiar with Prison Break, and there's a great deal of Oz inspiration in Prison Break. Or the film Un Prophète by Jacques Audiard. Some of you may have seen Un Prophète by Jacques Audiard, which is a gorgeous film. Jacques Audiard has said time and again that he was massively inspired by Oz. Okay, so sorry, we seem to have an issue with the video here. Now is the right time to try and negotiate a few extra minutes. Okay, so I'll just maybe introduce the scene briefly, or some of the issues that I have a look at in this scene. This scene is about capital punishment. It's about the death penalty, and it's about the gross overrepresentation, the massive overrepresentation of African Americans in the application of the death penalty. Okay, but more generally, what Oz looks at is the very clear overrepresentation of African Americans in American prisons. Okay, you must bear in mind that this was broadcast in 1997, so already a few decades after the war on drugs had started. Okay, and at the time when the policies of zero tolerance, especially in New York, for instance, started to be introduced by former Mayor Rudolph Giuliani, for instance. Okay.
In America, we all have certain inalienable rights, like the right to bear arms and the right to remain silent. But the state has the ultimate right. It can kill us. Due to popular demand, Governor James Devlin revived capital punishment. And he decided that Jefferson Keane, a man he doesn't know, a man he will never even meet, should be put to death. Should be put down like a rabid dog.
The mood in this country has changed. People are sick of crime, sick of being afraid. They need a sign that something's being done.
Even, Governor, if it's been proven that executions have no effect on the increase or decrease of crime whatsoever?
Especially if it has no effect. These days, murders are random, senseless. Maybe the punishment should be too. Jefferson Keane will be the first person executed by this state in 34 years. He's the first because he snapped the neck of another inmate. He's the first because he deserves to die.
Jefferson Keane is the first because he's black and he's young. The public is not going to feel safe if we execute a 70-year-old white guy.
You're not going to turn this into a racial thing with me, are you?
Oh, please.
Has anybody thought about all the protesters we're going to have outside? Marching around, yelling slogans, and then the counter-protesters yelling at them.
Yeah, and we'll have even less parking spaces.
The protesters aren't going to be a problem.
I want you to know that when those protesters come, I'm standing with them.
I can't have an employee of mine out there at a vigil holding a candle in front of a camera.
The last time I looked, we had freedom of speech and freedom of assembly in this country. Well, did you guys eliminate those rights too?
The governor's been biting my ass, saying he's going to make more budget cuts, and he means it. Up to and including your job.
Is this a threat? I've got a job, Leo. I've got a permanent vocation. I can go teach fifth-grade kids at Cathedral School. I can go be a missionary in Pago Pago.
Don't join the protesters.
And if I do?
You're fired.
Well, that's fine. Send you a postcard from Pago Pago.
Hey, march to...
That's it. Okay, the scene finishes here. Yeah, there are two persons I forgot to mention in the thanking note at the very beginning. These are the two technicians, okay, without whom obviously none of this could actually happen. So thanks to the two technicians out there who made that possible. Thanks. Yeah, so I want to have a look at a certain number of issues in this scene, which is very interesting and complex and very implacable, and trying to have a look at why, okay? First of all, there is one of the questions that is raised is the camera cannot lie. It's not about whether this man killed or didn't kill the person. It's why did he kill him, and what racial identity is his, okay, and and whether this has an impact on the decision to send him, to put him on death row, okay. I wrote there, the camera can't lie, or can it? Because one of the issues that is looked at in this episode is the camera, the video camera actually, shot this very scene, okay, but there was a person watching the scene, okay, behind the camera, and one of the questions that is raised is, why didn't this person do anything, okay, in order to prevent this from happening? And if you watch the scene again, we don't have time, but you will see that the camera slightly moves once or twice at some point, which clearly indicates that and this is actually what happens, a person actually moves the camera around. So there is a person, watching the scene from a distance, okay? And obviously this person was set up, it was a total setup, okay? So what I find interesting is the way that there is a very implacable chain of events from the murder scene to the trial. That we have no element about the trial at all. We see the members of the jury, the honorable members of the criminal court jury here, and then we see the press conference with Governor Devlin, and then we see this meeting in the prison staff room. Okay, we move from one place to another in a very logical, natural way, which insists on the implacability of the chain of events. And this is brought home very clearly with these two cues. Governor Devlin says, I quote, Jefferson Keane will be the first person executed by this state in 34 years. He's the first because he snapped the neck of another inmate. He's the first because he deserves to die. Then you get Sister Pete. She's a sister, okay? She's Sister Peter Marie, okay? She's a Catholic nun, okay? So she says, Jefferson Keane is the first because he's black and he's young. The public is not going to feel safe if we execute a 70-year-old white guy. It's as if this was a dialogue in the very same room, okay? Although it's not in the same room at all, which again insists on the implacability of this chain of events, okay? I feel that the public is not going to feel safe is very, very important. The feeling safe. It's not about being safe, it's about feeling safe, okay? We don't have time to insist on this, but it's a major issue, okay? So just a few statistics briefly on the overrepresentation of African Americans on the death row. If you have a look here, these are statistics for 2013, in other words, 15 or so years after the scene was broadcast. And black people represent 41.71% of the people on death row, whereas in actual fact, they are a mere 13.2% of the American population. So there is a very obvious demographic contrast here, okay? Which contrasts, again, massively with the white portion of the population. 43.10% of the people in death row are white, whereas whites represent 77.7% of the national population. Another important element is that the question of the overrepresentation of African Americans in prisons is much more important than their overrepresentation on death row. Why? Because for quite a few years now, there have been many people on death row, but their death sentence is not executed. Okay, so it's more a question. It's more a debate about morality or philosophy than an actual debate in sociological or demographic terms. Okay. Well, one instance I give here is California. In the year 2000, California had 614 prisoners on death row, but only one was executed. Okay, I'll refer back to that in a few seconds if I have time. Here you have the racial bias in the prison industrial complex, with the huge escalation in the number of prisoners in the United States. This U.S. prison population increased by 4,042% between 1970 and 1993. And obviously there's a racial bias involved. The incarceration rate in 1993 so for blacks was 1,895 for 100,000 people. Okay? As for whites, it was a mere 293 for 100,000 people. I'm sorry, I'm boring you with statistics here, but I think these statistics are very, very graphic and very important. And they run, they really parallel each other, this overrepresentation of African Americans, okay? Another thing that I think could be interesting to remember, rather than intersectionality, is the prison industrial complex, right? It's a major expression that is used repeatedly and has been used for quite a few years. What it means is that, especially in some poor areas in the United States, prisons now are a major economic activity. in very poor states like Mississippi, for instance, the prison industrial complex provides thousands of jobs. Okay. Okay. Now let me move on. So I still have a few minutes, I suppose, briefly. Another major expression that is used in those debates is the well-known school-to-prison pipeline. Okay, I'm using here an illustration used by the fairtest.org website. And I'll leave you the PowerPoint presentation so you can freely discuss this in class, etc., etc. But I think there's a lot of implacable truth to that. It's got nothing to do with the death penalty, but it's about the overrepresentation of African Americans in prisons. Okay. And on the right, you find something which is actually pretty much a bestseller, okay, a very welcome bestseller, The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness by Michelle Alexander. Okay, Jim Crow is, as you probably know, a synonym for racial segregation. All right. What I find interesting in the scene we've just been watching is that in this staff room meeting, it's almost as if you have American public opinion in miniature, okay, which I find quite interesting. And I'm tempted to make a parallel with the great film entitled 12 Angry Men. Some of you, I suppose, especially among the teachers, are familiar with this film, 12 Hommes en colère, 12 Angry Men. You really get that too in the film 12 Angry Men, okay? So Tim McManus, the EM city administrator, is one of the few characters who doesn't say anything, but he reacts by, throwing the chair when something stupid and really amoral is being said, okay? So he expresses his disagreement. Father Ray Mukada, the chaplain, is a Catholic priest, okay? He's the only character to never say anything, okay? And there's a great deal of embarrassment on his face. Leo Glynn, interestingly, the warden, is saying to the sister, you're not trying to turn this into a racial thing with me. Because he is black, he feels that he's more privileged to talk about a racial issue than somebody who is white, which is, I think, a very interesting idea, and it's the kind of idea you can have a debate about in class, I suppose. This man there on the very bottom left is complaining about the potential protest by saying, yeah, and we're going to have even less parking spaces, okay? A very sort of amoral, he removes moral thinking totally out of this debate, okay? Officer Diane Whitsley is saying pretty much the same thing. Are you thinking about all the protesters and all the counter-protesters that we're going to have outside, blah, blah, blah? And Augustus Hill is the person you hear at the beginning. In America, we have all certain inalienable rights, like the right to bear arms and the right to remain silent. His function throughout Oz is pretty much like the function of the Greek chorus or the chorus in Shakespeare plays, okay? La fonction du chœur, en fait, dans les pièces shakespeariennes, effectivement, ou la fonction du chœur dans les pièces, dans les tragédies grecques, effectivement, il y a quantité de parallèles à faire entre les deux. I don't know why I'm starting to speak French here. Okay, very briefly, I probably have 30 more seconds. In the book, we insist a great deal on how dated this scene is. I'm not saying it's old-fashioned and we should forget about it, not at all, but it's about how since then there has been a great deal of evolution in the application of the death penalty. Some states in the United States have removed death penalty, and a certain number of states have also stopped operating the death penalty. Not by bringing forward moral arguments, but by saying it doesn't work. It costs a lot and it doesn't work, okay? I'm quoting here Martin O'Malley, the governor of Maryland, who said in 2013, the death penalty is expensive and it does not work. And for that reason alone, I believe we should stop doing it. When he says for that reason alone, he's trying to silence some of the Republicans who will say, yeah, you're a bleeding heart liberal, blah, blah, blah. He's saying it's not about moral thinking, it's about the fact that it doesn't work. And for that reason alone, for reasons of efficiency, we should stop doing it, okay? A lot of it boils down to issues of money. And I want to finish with that quote by philosopher Michel Foucault, who insists a great deal on the the economic rationale in all these debates. Okay? I quote, le coupable, une fois qu'on le tient, est-ce que ça vaut la peine qu'on le punisse? Qu'est-ce que ça coûterait de le punir? Qu'est-ce qu'il faudrait faire pour le punir et en le punissant, le rééduquer? Est-ce qu'effectivement il est rééducable? Au fond, et c'est ça qui est très important, au fond, l'économie et le rapport économique entre le coût de la répression et le coût de la délinquance est la question fondamentale. Unquote. Okay, I've enjoyed talking to you. I may have talked too much, and I'm sorry for this, but I hope it's been fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monsieur Esteves. Tout d'abord, je le remercie d'avoir alimenté notre réflexion pour les ateliers qui vont s'enchaîner. Deuxièmement, je le félicite pour son bilinguisme aussi. Encore une fois, bravo pour sa présentation. Maintenant, je vous inviterai à retrouver votre facilitateur, votre animateur d'atelier au 3e, 4e ou 5e étage pour les 50 prochaines minutes de discussion et de débat, et voilà, et de création. Merci, très bonne journée.